Okay, we are going to start another chapter in Story Thieves. This is chapter 9. Remember, Bethany is very upset with Owen. Bethany looked in her living room window before going in just to see. Her mother seemed to be reading something, maybe a magazine, and her eyes were red. Not again, not tonight. Bethany just didn't have the strength to deal with this, too. Instead, a few minutes later, Bethany found herself in the library, walking through the stacks, checking to make sure no one else was around. Forget her mother, forget that jerk Owen, forget everything else. It didn't matter. None of it did. Not if the location spell worked and found her father. She took a deep breath, running through the spell in her head. This was so wrong. Magic in the real world? What if other people saw? What if it created a gigantic flaming arrow that pointed out the book her father was in? What if it started screaming the name of the book and she couldn't turn it off quickly enough? Like she'd forgotten to turn her cell phone off in a movie. Didn't matter. Not anymore. This was it. All she had to do was say the words, and she'd know exactly where her father was. So why couldn't she do it? And why couldn't her legs stop shaking? But she knew why, because as badly as today had been, it could have been much, much worse. What if she found her father and he didn't want to come home? The words to the spell were ready, right on the tip of her tongue. Her father had gotten himself out of the book to begin with, hadn't he? Why couldn't he now? Wasn't that the real question? What if her father just didn't care? What if he didn't remember her somehow? Or worse, what if he didn't? What if he didn't? A one-time only spell. She could find her father. She could find her father. No, she couldn't. Someone turned the corner and gave her a concerned look, and she realized she was sweating, that her legs were still shaking. She forced a smile, then walked too quickly to the children's section and fell into a seat. Can't turn the page. The books helped. Being around all the stories somehow let her breathe again. They didn't want anything from her or think badly of her. They were just there to tell their stories. When her legs stopped shaking, she wiped her forehead with her sleeve, then stood up to walk along the shelves, touching random books here and there. Something would be here to distract her. Some strange world that didn't care about fathers or mothers or Owens. Island of the Blue Dolphins? Beautiful, but way too dangerous, with the dogs and the devilfish and everything. A wrinkle in time. A little too much quantum theory for a night like this. Can I help you find anything? Asked a woman behind her, and Bethany glanced over her shoulder to find Owen's mother giving her a pleasant look. Bethany quickly turned away, shaking her head. Oh, no thanks, I'm fine. Can I make some suggestions? If you want, the librarian said, standing next to Bethany. What kinds of books do you like? I'm not really a big reader, Bethany said quietly, turning her body away as much as she could. Oh, I always see you in here, Owen's mother said, running her hands over the books like she was looking for something. Don't worry. Maybe you just haven't found your favorite book yet. I honestly don't think anyone has. Just when you think you might have a favorite, something even better comes along. It's the one rule they taught me in librarian school. You went to librarian school? Bethany asked, in spite of herself. You can quiz me on the Dewey Decimal System if you want. Ask me about the number Victorian biography goes under. I dare you. Bethany smiled, then remembered what was happening. I'm okay. I just wanted this one. She grabbed something random off the shelf and tried to make an escape, but Owen's mother stepped in front of her. Half upon a time, I met that author once. He misspelled his own name in my book when he signed it. Weird. If I were you, I'd try here. What about this? It's one of my favorites. I thought you couldn't have favorites, Bethany said. Nah. The second rule they taught us in librarian school is that you can have as many favorite books as there are books, she said, not cracking a smile. Do you want to know what the third rule is? That there are no rules? The librarian laughed. That's the fourth rule, actually. The third rule is that if you want to find a new favorite book, ask the librarian. They always know. She handed Bethany a copy of something called The Great Brain. Give it a try and let me know what you think. Bethany nodded, giving up, then followed Owen's mother back to the checkout desk and signed the book out. She turned to leave, then paused. Thanks for the book. That was nice of you. Let me know if you like it, the woman said, and next time, maybe you can recommend something for me. Bethany smiled and waved goodbye, then left the library holding her new book close. Her mind was not at all on what she was doing. Weirdly, it took her longer to get home from the library than usual. Even weirder, she found herself at Owen's house again without even realizing it. Ugh! What was she doing? It's not like she owed him anything. He should really be the one apologizing to her. But what had he really done wrong? He told a character in a book that, okay, there was that, and that was huge, yes, but it hadn't shown up in the book, and for all she knew, maybe it never would. After all, that wizard guy had been supposed to die, right? So maybe he wouldn't even have a chance to tell anyone what had happened. She could go back and check in a few days before the last Kill Nomenfoot book came out, just to make sure that nothing had changed. Too bad she hadn't actually let the forget spell infect her or whatever. That would have made things a lot easier. In the meantime, she could go in and at least listen to Owen apologize again. That wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to sit around, at least for a few minutes. Better wrap it all up now than have to deal with him throwing her guilty looks in school or whatever, assuming he'd even care. Besides, Owen's mother wasn't the worst or anything. So somewhere in there, Owen had to be not so bad, too. She knocked on the front door and waited for a few seconds, then knocked again. No answer. Maybe he couldn't hear her up in his room. He was probably listening to depressing music, thinking how sad it was that he'd betrayed her like that. That just made sense. She tried the door, and it was still unlocked, so she pushed it open and walked in. It wasn't breaking and entering if you'd just been in the place and had stomped off. She was pretty sure. The lights hadn't been turned on since she left, so it looked like Owen hadn't even come out of his room. That made Bethany feel even more sure about letting him apologize again. Obviously, he was upset. So upset he couldn't even bear to go downstairs. Unless he was playing video games in his room or something. No, he had to be upset. You couldn't just do something like he'd done and not feel horrible. No one was that heartless. She took a deep breath, practiced a stern but forgiving face, then knocked on his door at the top of the stairs. Owen, it's Bethany. I forgot my book. Yeah, that sounded like a good reason to come back. I'm still mad, obviously, because you were a huge jerk and you never should have done what you did. It was like you betrayed me, Owen, you know? You promised one thing and lied, and you know how messed up that is. She paused, waiting for a response, but didn't hear one. He probably felt too guilty. It's very, very messed up, she said, answering her own question. So let me have my book, and we can go back to never speaking to each other again. There. Now that she'd made her point, she could take the high road and let him apologize his way back into being friends with her. After a while, at least. Feeling good about things, she opened the door to an empty room. Empty except for the Kill Nomenfoot book, which was still lying open right in the middle of the floor. He couldn't have. No way. He he couldn't have gone back. It wasn't possible. Only she could jump into books, right? Right? She slowly picked up Foot book and opened it to the last page. Goodbye, Sebastian, Dr. Variety said, and his gun began powering up to fire. So it still read the same as before, but maybe it wouldn't hurt to check. She pushed her head in just to make sure, since it was impossible, but something slammed into her, and the last thing she could see before everything went black was Owen's surprised face as someone yanked her all the way into the book. Okay, you guys, that's the end of the chapter.